In the ever-evolving landscape of the NBA, player trades and free agent signings are a common occurrence, often shaping the directions of teams and individuals. While some prove to be pivotal moments that elevate players to new heights, others unfortunately have the opposite effect and may significantly hinder their careers. These transactions not only alter the course of NBA teams, but leave lasting impressions on the players involved and the fans, leading to a downturn in their once promising careers. Join me as we discuss why these trades ruined NBA careers. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell for more NBA videos, and follow me on Twitter. Now let's get to the video. First up, Lamar Odom. Now, Lamar Odom is one of those players that gets talked about now more than he did when he was actually playing. His 6'10" frame, being able to handle the ball the way he could, and being able to create his own shot, he was ahead of his time. He was a beloved figure in Los Angeles and one of the unsung heroes for their back-to-back championships. He was even named Sixth Man of the Year in 2011, averaging 14 points per game off the bench. And Los Angeles embraced and loved Lamar. But what goes up must come down. And it all came crashing down in 2011 when the Lakers were ready to trade him away for Chris Paul. The veto trade heard around the world. And while you can't blame the Lakers for going after a prime Chris Paul, I mean, he was the best point guard in the league. The relationship with the Lakers and Lamar was fractured at that point, and he was done. He wanted out, and on December 11, 2011, Lamar Odom was traded to the Dallas Mavericks. But by 2012, he was struggling to find his niche. He was in constant rumors about his work ethic, his dedication, his commitment. His consistency was in question. And he was assigned to the D-League in March of 2012. He was listed inactive on April 9th for the remainder of the season. Mavs owner Mark Cuban admitted that a clash between him and Odom during halftime at a game against the Grizzlies on April 7th was the last straw. He said Lamar responded angrily when he was questioned about his commitment, asking if he was in or out. He would play only one season with the Mavs, averaging only 6 points and 4 rebounds per game, and shooting only 35% from the field, all career lows. And he would play one more season with the Clippers before ultimately deciding to retire. It seems like once he left Los Angeles, that was it for him after that. Next up, Deron Williams. During the late 2000s and early 2010s, there was a serious debate between Chris Paul and Deron Williams as who was the best point guard in the NBA. Now, I always thought Chris Paul had the edge, but you couldn't go wrong with either one. As Williams was more of a shot maker and Paul was more of a distributor, you couldn't go wrong. Deron Williams was an automatic double-double from scoring and assists. He led Utah to some of their best seasons since Stockton and Malone, the height of the Utah Jazz organization. He was a 3-time All-Star and 2-time All-NBA selection before requesting out shortly after getting into it with Jerry Sloan. Ultimately, he said he wanted to compete for championships and Utah wasn't doing that any longer. And he had his choice to play in New Jersey or to go back home and play with the Dallas Mavericks. He ultimately decided to go to the Nets during the 2011 season, which is kind of ironic considering that the Mavs won the NBA championship that season. Meanwhile, Williams had an all-star season and ultimately signed a 5-year, $98 million contract to stay with the Nets, who had just moved to Brooklyn. He only had mild success reaching the playoffs a handful of times, but he was starting to decline rapidly, and on July 11, 2015, he was waived by the Nets. And by 2016, he was only averaging 11 points and 5 assists per game, a far cry from where he was in his prime. And by the time he chose to join the Mavericks, the championship window had completely closed. He would play 2 seasons with the Mavericks before signing with the Cavaliers and retiring in 2018. Next up, Allen Iverson. Now, Iverson is one of the biggest icons the NBA has ever seen. He was a true inspiration for smaller players. If you were short and you played basketball, chances are you looked up to Iverson. You had his shoes, his poster, a bobblehead. You had something. You had an armband, an arm sleeve. You had something that represented Iverson. He brought a completely different culture to the NBA during the 2000s. He set the league on fire being a 6-foot shooting guard who had no issues getting buckets over taller defenders. He led the league in scoring 4 times as well as the MVP during his run with the Sixers, but as I say, what goes up must come down. And after having issues with the coaching staff and front office, he was traded to the Nuggets, who were trying to contend for a championship. But even still, he would continue to be one of the best players in the NBA during his 2.5 seasons with the Nuggets. He averaged 25 points and 7 assists per game, and he's one of the best shooting guards in the league. But after reportedly wearing out his welcome in Denver, he was traded once again to the Detroit Pistons and then to the Memphis Grizzlies for 3 games and finishing his career back out in Philadelphia, where it all started. Next up, Josh Smith. Now, Josh Smith during the 2010s was one of the most electrifying forwards in the game. His athleticism was literally off the charts, averaging over 18 points and 8 rebounds at his peak. He helped the Hawks reach the playoffs 6 times in 9 seasons, and although he never became an all-star, it certainly seemed like he should have, at least in my opinion. And all was well in Atlanta. But as I say, what goes up must come down. And Smith was signed with the Pistons during free agency. And he had a really good first season, averaging 16 points, 7 rebounds per game. But his production dropped significantly, and he looked checked out from the Pistons. And while you can't blame him, as they were starting Andre Drummond, Greg Monroe, and Josh Smith after 3, who just wasn't a shooter, I can kind of understand him being checked out. He would eventually be waived by Detroit, and he would ultimately sign with Houston, the Clippers, and then Houston again. And by the age of 30, he was out of the league entirely, and he was headed to China to play out the remaining years of his basketball career. Next up, Lance Stephenson. Now, Lance Stephenson was never an all-star, but in my opinion, he should have been one. He's one of those players that was talented enough to at least be an all-star. He definitely had the potential to be one. He's one of my favorite players to watch, so maybe I'm a little biased. But during his days with the Indiana Pacers, early in his career, he made an impact on the team. He was a great defender and facilitator, a really good playmaker. He could create his own shot, and he brought energy and electricity to the Pacers that they just hadn't seen in a while, along with those silly antics like the time he blew on LeBron's ear, or the wild celebrations he would do after crossing somebody up or making some type of electric pass. Like, he was exciting to watch. He peaked for the Pacers in 2014 when he averaged 14 points per game, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists. He was a huge factor in helping the Pacers reach the conference finals. Now, when you see those numbers, you don't think he wasn't that good. But you really have to watch. Numbers aren't everything. This guy was extremely talented. He was just on a team with Paul George and Prime Roy Hibbert, who were the main guys at the time. And during free agency, he felt disrespected by the Pacers, who had offered him a 4-year, $44 million contract. And he would ultimately sign with the Hornets for 3 years, $27 million. And although he would excel at the less noticeable things like rebounding and playmaking, his lack of three-point shooting caused him to be a bad fit for the Hornets, and he was traded to the Clippers. And as I said, what comes up must go down. And by the end of 2019, Stephenson was playing basketball in China. While Stephenson leaving the Pacers, I would say, was his biggest mistake, in my opinion. The grass is only greener when you water it. You can't really blame him for wanting more opportunities and a chance to really prove he was one of the better players in the league. The Hornets just didn't give him that opportunity.